Edgewood University. Year 1, Episode 20, Secrets and Lies. It's not who you are or what you've become that matters in your life. It matters on what you make of your life to preserve your own peace. Tyler? Asked Daniel, stepping off the porch and stumbling toward the guy. Layla's father hugged him and sobbed. "Oh, my sweet boy." Tyler hugged him back, and Daniel pulled back. Excuse me. "I am your daughter," said Layla, and Faith and Connor chuckled as they unloaded the trunk. Celine walked toward her daughter and hugged her. "My sweet girl," she said, pulling Tyler into the embrace. "I'm so glad you both are well and safe." She sniffed, and Layla gave her father a smug look. "See, Daddy, that's how you do it." Daniel scoffed, pulled his daughter into his arms, and hugged her tight. "I see you've added color into your wardrobe," he teased, and Layla snorted. "So, I brought more friends. This is Tyler's girlfriend, Faith, and Connor, who happens to be my boyfriend," she said, toeing the dirt. Connor shook her parents' hand, and Faith hugged Celine. "It's so nice to meet you. Layla has told me a lot about you," she said, and Celine smiled. "It's good to meet you, dear." Esther closed the trunk, and Layla looked at the man. "See you next semester, Ms. Holland. Here is the envelope. Just open it the day before you want to return, and I will be here the next day at 8 a.m., he said, and Layla hugged the round, bald man. "See you soon. Have a good break," she said. He chuckled, hugged her back, got into the car, waved, and left. She smiled inside happily, watching the car disappear. "I called Tyler, grabbing his and Faith's bags, and Layla turned around. She smiled, looking at him, Faith, Connor, and her parents. She was lucky to have them. "Time to go in and have that chat," said Connor, and she pressed her lips together, nodding. Connor picked up his and her bags, and she grabbed her suitcase, and everyone headed inside. Layla explained why she acted differently and showed her parents the flaming balls in her palms. Connor, Faith, and Tyler stayed in Layla's room while she and her parents talked, and Tyler blew up the air mattress in the closet he used to use when he and Layla were kids. The Hollands bought a full-size one, so the kids could sleep on it together in the backyard, and Layla and Tyler used it many times. Connor was surprised at how big Layla's bedroom was. It was bigger than their room at school. He looked at the pictures of her, Tyler, and their schoolmates on the walls and realized how close she and he were. He saw a picture of Layla when she was 6 or 7 with a yellow two-piece on, swinging on a tire swing above a river, and Tyler was jumping from a tree branch. He chuckled, feeling a tingling sensation in his heart, and realized he was falling in love with the girl. The sensation grew stronger with every picture he looked at, and he gasped, holding his chest. Tyler and Faith looked at him, and he shook his head. "What's happening to me?" Her Faith looked into his eyes and saw them flicker purple and red. A smile spread across her face, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Connor searched her eyes and creased his brow. "Connor, you're falling in love with her," she whispered, grabbing his face. She watched his eyes flicker again and hugged him. Tyler saw the flicker and felt a sharp stab in his heart. He knew Layla loved her best friend, but now Connor would come before him. The pack rank was aligning itself, and Layla was their alpha because Connor had surrendered his dominance. He smiled and felt a new likeness for the man who stole his best friend's heart. Faith pulled back, wiped her face, and looked at Tyler. He felt a strong pull toward her and wondered if they would fall in love like Connor and Layla. The supernatural world was odd. Unlike when humans choose who they fall in love with, the paranormal community relied on the magic of the land to choose their life mate. "Layla, there's something your father and I need to tell you," said Celine, and Layla looked at her oddly. "What is it?" she asked, concerned. Her parents looked at each other and sighed. She looked at her mother and father and scoffed. "Come on, it can't be as bad as what I told you." Daniel sighed and took his daughter's hand. "Lie, sweetheart. When we told you Tyler was dead, we knew he and his parents moved out of town. They told us that you two would never see each other again and to tell you what we thought was best," he explained. "What?" she exclaimed, pulling her hand from his and standing. "Why would you say he was dead? You nor did those bastards didn't know if we were going to see each other again. Especially Peter. That's the monster that did this to me," she exclaimed, lifting her shirt. Daniel and Celine looked at her sadly, and her mother cleared her throat. "Danny, we're so sorry," she said, and Layla shook her head. She walked toward her father, pulled his cigarettes and lighter from his pocket, and Daniel sighed. "Lay, please?" "No, Dad. I can't believe you two were on this whole crazy fiasco." "Layla, we only did what we thought was best," she said, and Layla growled, making her parents stare at her. "Just leave me alone." She breathed and walked out the back door. "Layla," her father yelled, but she ignored him. Daniel and Celine opened the back door and gasped, seeing their daughter with flaming wings. Layla glared at them and flew into the sky. "I wonder how it's going down there," asked Faith, and Tyler shook his head. "Knowing them, this could take a while. The Hollands are simple people," he said, and Faith nodded. Connor sighed and looked through Layla's sketchbook. She had been drawing him for a long time, and he wondered if she was right about being connected before they met. Layla. Connor, Faith, and Tyler looked at each other, and something flew past the window. "What was that?" asked Faith. Tyler shook his head, and they ran downstairs. "Mr. and Mrs. Holland, is everything all right?" asked Faith as she, Connor, and Tyler ran out the back door. Celine shrugged and chuckled. "My daughter has wings and can make a fire in her hands. I'm a bit overwhelmed, dear." Faith sighed and hung her head. "I'm sorry," she said, and Celine touched her face. "I think I understand how my daughter felt coming to Edgewood. I feel like I have lost my mind," she said, and Daniel agreed. "So, where did she go?" asked Connor, and her father pointed up. Connor was about to spread his wings when his sister put his hand on his shoulder. "These people are already terrified enough. Warn them and do it slowly," she whispered, and he nodded. He looked at Layla's parents and cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Holland, I am like your daughter. I have silver wings, and I'm going to go after her," he said, and Daniel and Celine nodded. "Can I watch?" asked Celine. Connor smiled and nodded. He slowly spread his wings, and she stared as a tear rolled down her cheek. "They're beautiful," she whispered. He bowed and flew into the sky. Faith bumped the woman with her shoulder and giggled. "He's my brother, but I don't have wings, and neither does Tyler," she said, and Celine blew a breath. "This is going to take some time getting used to," she said, and Faith smiled. "I understand, but you got us to help you along the process. In our world, Layla is part of our family, so that makes you family too." Celine smiled and looked at her husband. He shrugged and Tyler snorted, shaking his head. Daniel looked up and sighed. "I wonder what it would be like to fly," he said, and Faith snickered. Connor found Layla hovering above the clouds, and tears rolled down her cheeks. He flew toward her and put his hands on her waist, searching her eyes. "You scared your parents," he said softly, and she huffed a sob. "I'm sorry." Layla cried, and Connor pulled her close. She wrapped her arms and legs around him as her wings disappeared, and he hugged her tight, rubbing her back. "What's wrong, babe?" "My parents knew Tyler was alive." She sobbed, and he twirled slowly. "But they were doing what they thought was best. They didn't know this would happen, or did you?" The sound of his voice was soothing, and his touch was calming. She rested her head on his shoulder and sniffed. "No," she whispered. "Now, let's see if we can get your parents to understand better before they lose their minds. And then we'll have to get a warlock, and the school board will get involved. It would be just a big mess." Layla chuckled and picked up her head. She searched his eyes and grinned. Connor looked at her oddly, and she bit her lower lip, smirking. "What's going on inside that pretty head of yours?" he asked, and she raised her eyebrows. "Look at all this privacy we have," she said, and he grinned. She kissed him deeply, and he linked his hands under her legs. He kissed her back, and she bit his lower lip. A growl rumbled through his chest, and she smiled, running her fingers through his hair. He pulled back and searched her eyes. "How are you doing this to me?" he asked, and she smirked. "I'm not doing anything to you. You're changing." Connor smiled and kissed her lips softly as he descended. Layla giggled and held on as he slowly twirled to the ground. Celine and Daniel looked at their daughter and smiled. Seeing them together made their fears disappear, and they accepted there were things in the world that they would never understand. Layla, Faith, Connor, Tyler, and the Hollands became close over the 3-month break, and Celine and Daniel seemed to understand more every day and accept their daughter was different. Layla took her father and mother flying, and they loved it. Faith and Tyler became closer, and Daniel gave them a spare bedroom. He told them the room was theirs when they came home. Tyler told Daniel and Celine about how his parents weren't with them anymore, and the Hollands said he was part of the family and always had been. They were surprised that he and Layla didn't get into a relationship, and Tyler explained in detail how the supernatural world worked. Daniel and Connor spent time together, chopping wood, going to town to run errands, and having a drink in the barn on Saturday nights. Layla's father decided Connor was a good man, as glad his daughter didn't pick an evil wrongdoer who only wanted to get inside her pants. Celine and Layla took Faith shopping at the mall, sightseeing to the zoo, and out for the best ice cream and mortar. Layla told her mother about Connor, and Celine saw how happy her daughter was talking about him and smiled. Connor sounded like a good man to take care of her daughter and told Layla, if he ever hurt her, to punch him in his pretty little face. Faith agreed with her mother, and Celine was happy Layla had a friend like her the night before heading back to Edgewood. Connor and Celine were in the kitchen cooking dinner, and Daniel, Tyler, Layla, and Faith sat in the living room, drinking beer, talking and laughing. "So, Connor, what are your intentions with my daughter?" asked Celine. Connor chuckled, stirring the pasta sauce, and smirked. Do fun things like hiking, rock climbing, and walking the beach at sunset. Stuff to enjoy ourselves and explore everything about each other. Layla is a positive change in my life, and if it wasn't for her, I would still be stuck in my dark ways," he said. Celine looked at the man and raised an eyebrow. "Wow, either you've read many romance novels or have had lots of experience answering like that," she said, and he snickered. "I am very old, ma'am, and very wise. I've seen and have experienced a lot in my time," he said. She looked him over and smirked. "You look very young for an old guy," she said, and Connor laughed. "That's what life said." "So, how old are you?" He chuckled, tasted the sauce, and gave her a thoughtful look. "I'm over a century old." Celine's eyes widened, and she cleared her throat. "My daughter definitely has good taste, and please forgive me. I'm not trying to sound like I'm hitting on you." She snickered, and Connor laughed. He was used to older women hitting on him and knew how to brush it off. He figured since the woman was on her 3rd glass of wine, the alcohol affected her, and he gave her a thoughtful look. "I think you've had your limit," he said, pointing to the glass. Celine giggled, sighed, and set the glass on the counter. "I think you're right. I am not the mom who hits on her daughter's boyfriend," she said, and Connor chuckled. "It's okay. It was no big deal and no harm done, Mrs. Holland." She nodded, smiled, and grabbed her glass. She raised it in the air, and he raised his. "To our new and beautiful, strange family," she said, and he tapped his glass with hers. "To Layla, for making me a better man." Celine tapped her glass with his, and they took a sip. Connor set his glass down and finished the last touches on dinner. Layla walked into the kitchen, smiled at her mother, and walked toward Connor. She slid her hands around his waist and sniffed the air. That smells so good," she said, and Connor put his arm around her and kissed her head. "Well, if you would be so kind as to help me set the table, we can eat this delicious meal unless you want to act like a pack of wild animals and eat with our hands." He teased, and Layla and Celine laughed. Layla pulled back, looked into her boyfriend's eyes, and smiled. "All right, I will get the plates.